Okay, well, I'm going to work. Oh, excellent. Right. Well, I'm going to work on the assumption that you can all hear me now, and I'm going to get going. Sorry about that slight technical glitch. Now, to start off with, I'm just going to answer some questions, and I'm going to do a little reading, and we've got a little bit of a competition. And two of the questions that I got are actually quite straightforward, and they kind of feed into doing a nice introduction to the book. So the first question, what made you want to have your own spin on the Robin Hood character and story? This is a question from Ryan. And the second question on a related one is, what relevance do you think Robin Hood has to readers today, and what made you choose to modernise it? So that's sort of a really interesting point, and why I wanted to actually write the Robin Hood series was because Robin Hood is this legend that goes back over hundreds of years. And you know, there have been all these different adaptations of it. There have been everything from, you know, ancient poems to Disney cartoons. We've had, you know, updates, modern stuff. There's been like a Filipino TV series. There's been Bollywood Robin Hoods. There's been boy Robin Hoods, girl Robin Hoods, animated Robin Hoods. So I describe it as being a bit like a kind of trashy Shakespeare story. And, you know, with the trashy Shakespeare story, everyone gets to reinvent it. Everyone gets to make their own version. So my version of Robin Hood is a 12-year-old kid living in the modern world and getting to do some cool kind of stuff with archery, running away, being on the run, being in the forest and stuff like that. So that's just a brief and slightly rubbish introduction to the book. We did have a really great review in the Daily Mail the other day. The Daily Mail reviewed Robin Hood as witty characters, clever twists and high-tech gadgetry. This scores a bullseye, and that was in the Daily Mail, so we know it must be absolutely true. Now, before I take to do some more questions, I'm going to do a little reading from the book. And we'll begin with the author's note. The characters in this book are fictional and a lot more bouncy than real people. Please don't try to copy any of Robin's stunts. Please don't shoot arrows at people or animals. If you do try something stupid and wind up breaking your legs, don't come running to me. Chapter number 1. Mr. Barclay is a nutter. The legend of Robin Hood begins in Loxley High School on a Wednesday afternoon. It was the middle of lunch break, and pepperoni pizza and buttered corn sat heavy in 12-year-old Robin's nervous stomach. If we get caught, we're dead, Robin's pal Alan Adol noted as he shoulder barged through double doors. The school was a dump, and the boy set off down a corridor lined with vandalised lockers. Mildew on the windows gave the light a greenish tinge, and a stink wafted from drains in the girls' bathroom at the far end. The two lads were a contrast. Robin was small but muscly, with scruffy hair and ketchup down his purple school polo shirt. Alan was a neat freak. His gangly frame started with madly expensive basketball boots, whiter than anything in a toothpaste ad, and topped out with an extravagant afro that forced him to duck under doors. Mr. Barclay's a nutter, Alan continued. Craig got 2 weeks of detention for that burp in assembly. Robin smirked at the memory. Craig's vast rolling belch, silencing a guest lecturing on water safety and leaving half the school in hysterical laughter as Mr. Barclay gripped Craig by his collar and dragged him out of the gym. Barclay's on lunch duty on the other side of the school, Robin soothed, and you're just my lookout. All of the benefits, none of the risk. Robin was trying to sound calm, but shuddered when he stopped at a door. It had muddy kick marks and peeling brown paint. The sign read, Mr. Barclay, head of year 7. Under which someone had graffitied, abandon hope ye who entered here. Can you get me an A? Alan begged, as Robin pulled a neon yellow plastic key out of his pocket. Mate, you can barely add 2 numbers together. Are you saying I'm thick? Alan accused. Maths isn't one of your strengths, Robin said diplomatically. Nobody's going to believe it if you get an A. How'd you get Mr. Barclay's key anyway? Alan asked. He leaves his keys on the desk in his classroom, Robin explained. I took a close-up photo, then made copies using the 3D printer at my dad's work. My dad's got a 3D printer, Alan said. He only used it once, so basically he spent 500 quid to make a small plastic hedgehog. Your family's got way too much money, Robin said irritably. Can we please concentrate? Keys are normally metal, so Robin worried as he slotted the yellow plastic inside the lock. Some girls ran out of the bathroom. There was a big shriek and one shouted, Give me my hat, Moosebrain! But they paid the boys no attention. Once they were out of sight, Robin twisted the key in the lock and felt it flex. I'm bigger, shall I try? Alan asked. I don't want it to snap, Robin explained. I'm being gentle. There was an alarming scraping sound, but just as Robin thought his efforts were doomed, the bolt made a satisfying thunk. Am I a genius or what? Robin said brightly. We're in. So that's just a brief introduction to the book. And now I'm going to mention the fact that we have a little competition to go with this thing, and I'm going to read it because it's a little bit complicated. To celebrate the launch of Robin Hood, we are launching an emoji challenge to take a photo of yourself holding the arrow and shooting it with a friend with the hashtag Much More Launch to win a Zing Hyperstrike. The closing date is 23:59 p.m. The closing date is April the 9th at 23:59. So this is an example of someone posing, entering the competition with their arrowy type thing, and you have to make your own version of that. And when you've made your own version of that, basically, I'm a bit confused. So you can go to @HotKeyBooksTeen on Twitter to find out the full set of rules about that competition. The Zing Hyperstrike is actually quite good fun. I've actually got one of these. This is my own Zing Hyperstrike. It's not the one that you will win, and it's pretty cool actually. You can give it a good blast. I had this out at Christmas time, and I whacked my nephew in the nuts with it. He was quite good. So yeah, that's pretty good fun. And the other thing that we've got is for the competition. We've got this incredible Cherub branded toilet roll that will also be part of your prize. And the person who loses will actually get this copy of Stormbreaker by Anthony Horowitz, on which I've wiped a bogey. So that's our competition, and I'll give you a little bit of a reminder. But basically, that was all very confusing. What you need to do is go to HotKeyBooksTeen on Twitter to find out what was going on. So, some more questions that I've got. Do feel free to post some questions on the screen as well if you would like to. The next question I've got is from Scott. And the question is, do you think Robin Hood was a real person? This is actually a really interesting thing. I did some research. I did loads of research into Robin Hood. And basically, Robin Hood is not a real person. Robin Hood is a legend. It's something that evolved over hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's kind of evolved over time, starting off as poems, and it became like plays in the Shakespeare era. Some of the first novels were about Robin Hood. So it's really gone over and over again. Now, and the second part of Scott's question was, if you had Robin Hood, if you had an adaptation of Robin Hood and it was turned into a TV series or a film, what the hell am I saying? I'm going to read this whole question again. And who would you choose to play Robin Hood in your adaptation if your book was turned into a TV series or a film? This is always a difficult question. I get asked this about all of my different series. And the problem with it is, obviously, is when you're doing this stuff, kids grow up really fast. So you've kind of got to pick a child actor who is the right age and the right type of person to be there at the time. And people always ask me this about Cherub, who would play James in a Cherub book and it's in a Cherub movie. And it's like, well, it's probably going to be a kid who's about 10 or 11 years old who you've never, ever heard of. So the second question, the next one, comes from Liz via Twitter. And she asks, who is your favourite character in Robin Hood? I think my favourite thing about my version of Robin Hood is the character Marion and Robin. And they've kind of got a similar relationship to what James and Lauren have in the Cherub books, in that they're it's a boy and a girl, and they got on really well and they quite like each other, but they also sort of bicker and stuff like that. So yeah, I think the relationship between Robin and Marion in the book actually makes the Marion character my favourite. And she's quite interesting because she's a kind of complement to Robin. Robin is quite good at some of the physical stuff, but Marion has grown up in the forest her whole life and knows a lot about forests, living in the forest and fishing and stuff like that. So that makes her a really interesting character. One of the ones that has popped up on the screen is from Lewins Tromans. I hope I'm pronouncing that quickly. Frankly, I don't care if I am or not. Is there sexy time in the book? Interesting question, because actually I've made the Robin Hood books, they're slightly shorter and slightly younger than what the sort of Cheruby type books are. So there is no swear words at all. I'm not allowed to swear in the Robin Hood books, and I haven't really got into the whole relationshipy thing. Whether I will later on in the series as the books go along, Probably not to the same extent as Cherub, because I kind of want it to be for slightly younger readers than of what I've read some of my previous books. And the second question that Lewis has asked, very similar question, I've actually got it down here further, doesn't matter. Is it a series or a standalone book? So I've actually planned Robin Hood to be a series of books. Now, I've signed a contract for 4 books. The first one is obviously out today. The second one, which I've already written, will be out in January next year. Book number 3 is at the planning stage. There you go. That's my plan for Robin Hood 3, and I'm going to start writing that soon. And I've got a contract to write number 4. So the idea that I've got the contract for 4, but I would actually quite like it to be an open-ended series. So basically, if people buy the books and carry on reading them, it would then eventually be a longer series. I've sort of got it planned out for 12 books, but as I say, there'll definitely be 4. There may be as many as 12 if any bugger buys it. So the next question comes from Benjamin, who I can see watching. Hello, Benjamin. And his question, I know Benjamin's a bit of an archer. Will it be a longbow? Does Robin fire a longbow or a recurve bow or a compound bow? So I don't know if any of you can see this, but this is these are 3 different types of bow. And the compound bow is like the one that's like super complicated, and you can only really use it in competitions. Be no use in a forest at all because you have to like grease the bow and maintain it. And then there's the long bow, which is long, and there's the recurve bow. And Robin actually uses a recurve bow because he's quite short. So basically, he's a little kid and he's quite short. And I don't know that much about archery, but I think basically the recurve bow is the best one for sort of a kid sort of who's 12 years old, like my Robin character is, to use in the books. I'm sure lots of archery geeks will correct me on that, but you know, whatever. So the next question comes from Eric on Twitter. And he says, I read a bunch of the Cherub books and a few Henderson's Boys books. You have a website. Do you have a website that will help me figure out what order your books come in? Because I'm very confused. Okay, so if you get any of my physical books, the Cherub ones and stuff like that, they've always got a nice like series order inside the front cover that tells you the order of the books. Or if you go on my website, which is just my surname, muchamore.com, if you go to muchamore.com, I think that basically you'll get a listing of all the Cherub books in order there. And I do get this question a lot. People get really mixed up. And it's one of the reasons now why my Cherub books and all of my other books actually have numbers on the spine, because so many people get confused. And it's one of the questions that I get asked the most often. The next question comes from Sam on Facebook. And Sam says, I love how you explore the complexity of people. You don't just create one-dimensional characters. How do you get inside so many heads' feelings, and do you carry them around in the day while writing? I think the key to writing good characters is to actually have quite a lot of contrast. Sorry, not contrast, conflict. You know, if you've just got all the characters and they all love each other and they're all nice, you've got your good guys and your bad guys, and that's fine. But it's also important to have conflict between the good characters and the bad ones. So a bit like I was saying about Robin and Marion, they're the sort of 2 main good characters in my new book. But they bicker and they fight and they get cross with each other and they don't always agree about everything. And I think when you have that kind of conflict and tension between characters, it's what really helps you to make a believable story. And the next question comes from someone else on Facebook. I didn't actually get their name. And it says, why are there only a few mums in your story? Is it not a cool part of the adventure? I think in a roundabout way, this is a bit like the question that people ask about, basically, why do children's authors always kill off the parents and make their kids orphans? Or like in Robin Hood, the dad goes to prison and his mum is dead. And the problem is, in children's fiction, parents are just a massive pain in the butt. So basically, when you have a mum or a dad, if every time someone in a Cherub book has to ask their permission to go on a mission, or Robin in Robin Hood has to ask someone's permission, and the mum says, no, go and do your homework, it basically ruins the story. So, there's only so much you can do with this kind of thing. And if you want to create a fun kids adventure story, parents tend to get out of the way. So if you go back to, Roald Dahl, Enid Blyton, any of the classic children's authors, they all basically kick the parents out of the way. So the next question comes from Ruth. And actually, it's a few questions that I've actually printed off. Ruth asks, I'm in the US. My favourite bookstore doesn't have it available. Where can I get Robin Hood? At the moment, you'll probably just have to order it from the UK because we don't have a publisher. But I've also had quite a few other availability questions. For example, Maria asks, when will Robin Hood be out in Portugal? And Paul asks, when will Robin Hood be out in France? The answer to both of those questions is my Portuguese publisher will be publishing in sometime in 2021. And my French publisher will be publishing sometime in 2021. Hopefully we'll all be out of lockdown by then, so I can actually do something a bit more exciting than sit in my office asking questions. And finally, Theo asks, is there a German translation of Robin Hood planned? I'm sorry to say that at this stage, we don't have a German publisher. I know Germany is one of my biggest markets. I've got lots of Cherub fans in Germany, but so far we don't have a deal to sell Robin Hood in German. One other thing I'm going to remind everyone, if you read Robin Hood, and assuming you enjoy it, it's really helpful for authors these days if you put reviews on Amazon, because it really helps us get up the Amazon ranks, and people are obviously much more likely to buy a book if you like it. So if you read Robin Hood and you go online and you can post a nice 5-star review for Robin Hood, that's great. If you don't like Robin Hood, please don't post a review, basically. Just forget everything I just said. So yeah, reviews are absolutely great. Couple more questions while I cough, sorry. Katie on Facebook asked, why did you have to go and predict that there would be a global pandemic like you did in one of my favourite books ever, Killer T? First off, thanks, Katie, if you're watching. Great to know that you enjoyed Killer T. It is actually quite weird because like about 2 years ago, I published my book, Killer T. And Killer T is about a synthetic virus that takes over the world and everyone has to go into lockdown and there's quarantine at airports and all the kind of things that are actually happening in the real world now. So it is actually kind of weird that some of the stuff in Killer T has come true. And this has happened with a few of my books. You know, the other one of mine, Arctic Zoo, which came out last year. And I wrote Arctic Zoo being about a group of people who staged school protests, and it's led by a girl called Georgia who becomes this kind of folk hero. So the really weird thing about that is after I wrote Arctic Zoo, the whole like Greta Thunberg and her school strikes and all the environmental protests and all that actually started to come into being. So basically, yeah, it's actually really interesting that some of my books have this habit of coming true. The other example is quite funny. There were some articles in the newspaper last year about how sort of the government had been using young people as spies, which was also quite freaky. So clearly things that I put in my books have this weird habit of coming true. Have we got any more questions up on the screen? I'm hoping some of you are going to ask some questions. Benjamin says, would you consider doing any signing events after the lockdown is released and we will start to reintegrate into the outside world? Well, hopefully we'll be back to doing events. I think what we were planning to do for Robin Hood, I was going to be doing a nice big school tour, and I was going to be going around, and I think it was going to be a really big tour. I was going to be spending 2 weeks on tour, and we were doing great events, and I think it was going to be like 10,000 kids in 10 days, sort of speaking to like 400 or 500 kids at every event. But I did one preview event on World Book Day, or just after World Book Day, and then obviously with everything that's happened since, the whole tour has gone on. So it's a bit of a shame. We weren't going to do any public events, but hopefully later in the year, when things are back to normal, I will be able to go out back into schools and do the planned school events. And then maybe, you know, when the second Robin Hood book comes out in January, at that time, we will be able to go into schools and maybe do some public events too. Now, another question of this, it's from China Skis. I think I've said that right. That's probably not their real name, I suspect. Does Robin rob from the rich and give to the poor? Is this indicative of your political leanings? This is actually a really fun question because I always get teased because I'm a little bit right-wing, and most other children's authors tend to be like super left-wing. So it's always quite a funny question. Now, Robin Hood is often seen as being a sort of, you know, this hero who like redistributes wealth. And I think, yeah, the Robin Hood book is quite political in the sense that it's got quite a few bits in it about, you know, privatization and sort of inequality and stuff like that. I'm not really sure if it's necessarily my political views that I put into the book. It's usually easier to write sympathetic characters who are nice to everyone than to like write evil sort of right-wing Tory type people. So I think my books tend to be a bit more sort of left-wing and politically correct than what I am myself. And I actually find it really interesting that all of this stuff that evolves in Robin Hood, and how, you know, Robin Hood is like this perpetual thing. It's been going on forever. You can tell a Robin Hood story in Victorian times about, you know, inequality and how unfair it is that people are poor, and you can still tell that story now. So that's actually one of the things about Robin Hood. I think it's why it's so timeless. And like when I was researching Robin Hood, you know, there are stories of Robin Hood set in medieval times. There are stories set in the modern day. And there's even stuff like Rocket Robin Hood, which was a Canadian series that was set thousands of years in the future with Robin battling aliens. And the next question that's just popped up on screen is from Lewis again. I hope I'm saying that right. Lewis says, is there a main villain or is it just society in general? So what I've done with my Robin Hood series is, although it's set in the present day, most Robin Hood series over time have had this consistent bunch of characters. And like there's always the baddies, Guy Gisborne and the Sheriff of Nottingham. And Robin is surrounded by his crew, people like Alan Adal, Friar Tuck, stuff like that. So like in my version, Alan Adal is Robin's best mate. Little John character, who's always in the Robin Hood books, is Robin's brother. Friar Tuck is actually a girl called Freya Tuck. Marion is Robin's best friend. And the two baddies, there is the Sheriff of Nottingham is actually called Sheriff Marjorie, and she's this kind of quite evil, very wealthy, scheming politician who is the sort of British head of this big company called King Corporation, and they're always kind of trying to rig crooked contracts for running Sherwood Forest. And then there's Guy Gisborne. He is more of a kind of conventional villain. He's like a drug dealer, and he's the kind of gang boss in the town that Robin comes from. And the thing that actually kicks the whole Robin Hood story off is the idea of Robin actually gets himself into trouble with Guy Gisborne and has to go on the run. It does involve a rather gruesome scene in the book where Robin shoots a part of Guy Gisborne's anatomy with an arrow. So that's one of my most favourite bits of the book. It's actually quite a fun scene. So back to my list of questions. I can't remember where I got up to. Katie's question I did. The next one is from South Park fan on Twitter. Which is your favourite Cherub book to write, and who is your favourite Cherub character? I've got a few Cheruby questions lined up here. I know quite a lot of you are interested in Cherub and have read Cherub books. I always say my favourite Cherub book is The Recruit. Now, the reason that I say it's my favourite is just because it's such a cool thing when your first ever book comes up. There's really nothing like it. You know, you bring out your first book and it's really exciting, and your mum gets to see your book and you see your book on a shelf for the first time. And it's just a really nice feeling when your first book comes up. So that's actually my favourite book. In terms of the characters, very much symmetry with what I said about Marion being my favourite character in the Robin Hood books. Because of the chemistry with the main character. And I always say that Lauren is my favourite character in the Cherub books, again, because it's just so much fun. That sibling relationship with James and Lauren, where Lauren and James, they're brother and sister and they love each other, but they also annoy the hell out of each other too. So, yeah, basically that is a really important part of the story. And I think I just really like writing that kind of dynamic with two friends who get along really well, and that sort of love-hate frenemies kind of relationship. I think that's a really interesting thing to do. Now, interestingly, Benjamin, I'll do Adams. Adam has asked, when it comes to books that require research like this one, what is your writing process? Research is actually a really big and really important part of writing a story. I think one of the things that a lot of people think is that research is a pain and it's something that you've got to do to get through and to make your story. But what I tend to do is I have an idea, and then I take that idea and I do research. And as I do research into something, like say with the Cherub book, Brigand's MC, I actually get the Brigand's MC thing. And, you know, as you learn and you read about motorbike gangs and gang culture and stuff like that, that's where you actually get all of your ideas for the story from. So this always happens in my books. the stories develop as you do research. So research is an incredibly important part of doing my books. Lloyd asked, do you think this is your best book so far? Do you know it's really hard when you're an author? What you are always trying to do is you always want every book you write to be the best one. And I'm very proud of Robin Hood. I'm very proud of Cherub. I'm very proud of Rock War. I really like all of my books, kind of. I'm really proud of them, even the ones that have sold millions of copies and the ones that haven't sold very well. So I like to sort of think of all of my books equally. The next question is from Paul, and he asked, this is on my sheet here, Paul asked, is there any crossover between Cherub and Robin Hood? Now, one of these things, I jokingly call my books as all being set in what I call the MCU, or the Much More Creative Universe. So there are little overlaps between my books. So, for example, in Cherub, you've got the instructor, Mr. Large, and Mr. Large kind of pops up in one of the Rock War books. And I've always got this department store called Eldridge's, which is kind of a play on the British department store Selfridges. So basically, Eldridge's pops up in all of my books. In Rock War, there's Rage Cola, which is this fictional cola company that sponsors the Rock War tournament. And I think someone drinks Rage Cola in the last Cherub book and stuff like that. Now, the big crossover in this is actually I needed a kind of biker gang in the Robin Hood series. And I thought, well, I've already done lots of research into biker gangs, and I've already got the Brigands MC bike gang in Cherub. So actually, Marion, who's sort of the second main character after Robin, her dad is a guy called, I've forgotten what his damn name is now. Anyway, so Marion's dad is actually the head of a local chapter of a bike gang that lives out in Sherwood Forest. And he's in a chapter of Brigands MC, because I thought, if I'm going to have a bike gang in the book, why not have the main bike thing come back again? So Brigands MC, from the Cherub book Brigands MC, actually reappear in this Robin Hood series. And they'll probably actually get more coverage in this, because they're going to probably end up being in pretty much every book than they ever did in the Cherub series. Somewhere I saw, I think it scrolled off the top of my screen now, but someone said, what is my all-time favourite version of Robin Hood? It's quite hard to compare, because you could be comparing everything from like a 100-year-old silent movie to a modern Hollywood blockbuster to a Bollywood movie. I mean, some of the Bollywood versions of Robin Hood, the Indian movies, are absolutely bonkers, and they're quite hard to follow even when you watch the subtitles, but they're all breaking out in the Bollywood dancing and all that, and that's quite fun. Probably my favourite version, though, is actually a very contemporary, very modern one. It was made in Australia last year, and it was like 8 mini episodes. It was called Robbie Hood, and it's actually about an Indigenous Australian boy called Robbie Hood. And it's kind of, again, a bit like my version. It's a very modern, very contemporary update of the Robin Hood story. Andrea has asked, she's my lovely Portuguese editor. What is she asking? You talked about getting parents out of the way, but there's a lot of dysfunctional family relationships in your books. Does that help with the narrative? That's an interesting question. I think the thing about that is, if you have very straightforward, very wholesome relationships where there's no conflict and nothing ever goes wrong, what do you write about? People, I mean, the most common one people ask me about is like in the Cherub books, why does James cheat on Kerry? Why don't they just have this wonderful, perfect relationship? Because all that would happen is in book 2, James would get off with Kerry. He'd be they'd be boyfriend and girlfriend for the rest of the series. And by about book 4, everyone would be going, oh, this is so boring. Nothing ever happens with James and Kerry. I hate Kerry so much, or stuff like that. So it really is, conflict is what really drives a story, and conflict is what actually, gives you the drama that you need to actually sustain the story. Let's have a look at some of these questions I've got on screen here. Let's do another one. China Skis again has asked, what sort of music would be in the soundtrack of Robin Hood? That's an interesting one. To be honest, when I always think of music when I play my books. When I write my books. And it was actually really funny, because there are certain books that I associate with my books, and Robin Hood has got a particularly strong association, because At the start of the book, Robin kind of goes off and escapes in a car into the forest, running away from the baddie guy Gisborne. And the song that I kept thinking about while this was happening is a song called A Forest by The Cure. And every time I read that part of the book, and when I made my little video trailer for Robin Hood, I really wanted to actually use the music, A Forest by The Cure. But of course, that would have been mega expensive and I had to use some cheap copyright-free music. But yeah, so that is kind of my theme to Robin Hood in my head when I think about it, is A Forest by The Cure. So I'm sure you can find that track and play it if you want to hear what it is like. I know a few people are asking me about Netflix and Cherub. That is going to be answered, but I'm going to probably make that the last question right at the end, because I know that's the one you're all waiting to hear the answer to. So have we got any more up on the screen? I don't think we have. If anyone has got any more questions, I'm running out now, so do post them straight away if you've got anything else you want to ask. But I have got a couple more here. Oh, funny enough, I have reached. So David, Etienne, Dominic, Ben, about 10 other people have all asked, how is the film TV adaptation of Cherub coming along? This question I get asked so much. And obviously, ever since Cherub first came out in 2004, about a year later, we did a deal to try and get Cherub made as a film. And that process went on for 10 years with various companies, various partners, all trying to make a film. It didn't happen. The film deal fell through. So we did another deal with a company called Comics. And Comics wanted to make a Cherub TV series. And we first signed that deal, I think it was about 4 years ago. And Comics are still working on the project. We had some quite exciting developments late last year. And I have had some meetings with some people, and it's still very much going on. All of this Robin Hood, all of this Cherub film and TV stuff is happening, but it just happens so slowly. And it's like, if you're a Cherub fan and you're thinking, God, I've been waiting for this thing so long, and it's so painful waiting for a Cherub film or TV series, you know, how do you think I feel? I've been waiting on this for years. And it was interesting because I think out of all the sort of big selling British authors, who hadn't had anything that they'd made dramatised, made into a film or a TV series. I think it was like me and Owen Colfer were like the two longest standing ones. And of course, they have now made the Artemis Fowl movie, and I guess that's going to be coming up next year now because they've postponed all the movies. And yeah, I mean, someday I'm really hopeful that there'll be a Cherub adaptation, and who knows, maybe a Rock War adaptation and a Robin Hood adaptation too. It's ongoing, but whether it will happen in 2 years' time, or whether it will happen in 5 years' time, or whether it will never happen, I honestly can't say. All I can say is keep your fingers crossed, and I really hope that it does happen at some point. So I've just got one final question. Is there nothing else has popped up on the screen? So I'm just going to answer this one final question, which I just thought was actually a really interesting one. It comes from Matt on Twitter, and Matt asked, what is it like launching a book during a crisis? And this is actually really interesting because it's like, you know, I should have been out today. I remember when, I think about this time last year when Arctic Zoo came out, what I was doing was, you know, I was doing radio interviews, and I think I was on BBC Breakfast in the morning. And I think today, you know, I've got up, I've potted around my house, I've put some posters on the wall and done some other things, but it's all been quite sort of underwhelming. And the thing that I've really missed is the big book tour. But, you know, you have to be realistic about this. I think my predicament, you know, oh no, my book hasn't come out. I mean, there are people, you know, you can't buy my book in the shops, rather you can buy it, you know, to read online and stuff like that. When you think of a lot of other people who've lost their jobs, people who are sick and dying and stuff like that, in the context of this crisis, I think it's actually pretty small beans that some stuff has gone wrong with my book and things haven't gone as we hoped. But I think really, you know, it's a bit cheesy, but, you know, thoughts are really with other people and stuff much more important that has gone wrong. And I just see a couple more questions have popped up. Oliver asked, will you make another Dark Sun type book for Cherub? So Dark Sun, for those of you who don't know, was a little mini Cherub book. I might even have one. No, I don't have one on my shelf, so I can't show you. So it's one of those little £1 World Book Day books that we get here in the UK. Basically, you get invited to write a World Book Day book, and I was very privileged because I actually got to write two. I got to write one for Rock War, and I got to write one for Cherub. So if I did get to be invited to write another World Book Day book, I think it would be very, very lucky, because I don't think anyone has ever been asked to write three. But who knows? Ben asked another question. What are you doing to pass time during this lockdown period? Do you know, I've actually been doing lots of reading. I've been doing all the stuff everyone's doing, like watching Netflix and stuff like that. But it's quite difficult, and I was discussing this with a bunch of people, author friends and stuff like that on Facebook. I'm finding it really hard to concentrate. So what I will be doing, as all my tours and things have been cancelled, is this is my plan. This is what one of my chapter plans looks like. And this is for Robin Hood 3, Jet Skis, Swamps and Smugglers, which will presumably, all being well, be out at the end of 2021. And I guess as I'm at home and I can't go out and I can't do anything, probably the beginning of next week or maybe the beginning of the week after, I will sit at my computer and I'll start writing the third book in the Robin Hood series. Interesting. Oh, funny, now I was going to wind up. I'm getting some really good questions. Thomas has asked, I understand what you mean about conflict making things interesting, and far be it from me to question your writing, but why did you make James so consistently awful to everyone? I find James a really interesting character. He's kind of based on me, and he's also a typical teenager, and partly it goes back to the answer that I gave before about how you know, you need conflict in stories, and if James is always just super nice and is this clean-cut hero, I always find that kind of hero really boring. Like, I love TV series like The Sopranos where the hero is a bad guy, so I always kind of want to create my heroes as being, you know, a bit mischievous, a bit bad and stuff like that. And I just think James is kind of, he's a teenager, and most teenagers do stupid things, get things wrong, make poor decisions. And I kind of think it's the fact that James is like that actually makes the stories work. Even if you don't love him all the time, he is a believable character, or at least I'm trying to make him a believable character. Now, let me see what we've got here. So the question is sort of bouncing on the adaptation question. Maybe it's a weird one. Do you think the recent developments in UK politics would have an impact on a Cherub screenplay? That is quite an interesting point. I mean, when I think about, you know, if I was writing certain of my books now, I mean, Killer T, for example, a lot of the stuff that's in Killer T, although it's about a synthetic virus, and genetic engineering, a lot of the stuff in Killer T is kind of happening in the real world right now. If I was writing a Cherub story, you know, what's going to happen next? I'm sure some people are going to maybe write virus stories, but someone I was talking to the other day was saying, you know, they think after all this is over, people are actually going to want light, fun stories because we're going through this quite dark, quite distressing time. And I think a lot of people are just going to want, well, they think that a lot of people are really going to want, you know, these kind of upbeat, cheerful stories. I kind of hope not, because it's like, I must admit, I'm the kind of person, I like my fiction a little bit dark and a little bit messy. Someone is thanking me, but are they asking a question? I personally love the story. Right, so second, I personally loved your story Home. You released it on your website many years ago. Are there plans to write anything similar at any point? This question is from Kiwi, something. So basically, Home is an interesting one. When I wrote The Recruit, my very first book, while it was getting published, I actually wrote another book called Home. It was never published, but I just decided to put it on my website as a freebie. And the main reason that I took Home down is because basically Home is a story that's set in Africa, and so some of the settings are a bit similar to Arctic Zoo that came out last year. So I didn't want any confusion between Home and Arctic Zoo, so I took it off my website. But if anyone is actually looking for Home, to be honest, type Much More Home PDF into Google, and there are loads of places where it's been uploaded to dodgy sites and stuff like that, and you can download it. So it's quite a fun story. I haven't read it for a long time, so I can't even remember most of it. But yeah, it's a freebie, and although it's not on my website anymore, you can find it. Helen Walker has got a question from a Year 7 student. Who would win a fight, James Adams or Alex Rider? Well, I obviously am biased, and I like to think that James Adams would win the fight. Do you know, I honestly don't know, because the funny thing about Alex Rider is I only ever read the first book, and that was quite a long time ago. Alex Rider would actually probably win, because Alex Rider has all these like super gadgets and lives in more of a fantasy world. It's a bit like sort of Superman fighting a normal person. James is probably a bit of a slob and a coward and would probably just run away, I reckon. Okay, so I think we've reached the end of the questions. I don't think there's any more. that I can see up there. Oh, Adam has asked, I'll just do this one, this will be the very last one. Adam Breckles asked, who inspires you as an author? And this is one of those questions that you get asked a lot. And I always find it a really hard question to answer, because when you're a writer, I love to read and I always read different things. So, you know, sometimes I might be inspired by something I read, an article in a newspaper. Sometimes it might be an author. I think the two big influences on me growing up were the Asterix books, which I always loved, and I used to read those completely obsessively, and the Adrian Mole books. I used to absolutely love those when I was a kid. But in terms of like one specific big inspiration, I don't think there's actually one particular thing. And I did just say that was the last question, but someone did say technically, yeah, Bruce Norris would definitely beat James Adams in a fight. So before I go, I've just got a couple of things to remind everyone. First of all, this has been probably not the smoothest or the greatest YouTube production ever, but I am planning during this time to do some more YouTube-y type things, and hopefully I'll have a bit more time to plan them and maybe use some of my fancy camera gear instead of this rather rubbish webcam, which is the only thing that actually works on my computer. So do subscribe to my YouTube channel. A reminder about the competition. The competition that I spoke about earlier, and basically the best thing to do is to go to Hotkey Books Teen on Twitter, and I know Amy is going to be putting a tweet out soon, and you can win the Hyperstrike bow with your emoji thingamajig, what's the name, and I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm just waffling now. And yeah, so I subscribed, reminder about the competition, follow my YouTube channel, and I'm just going to do one final thing. If you just bear with me. I know we normally celebrate a book, the release of a book, with a glass of champagne or something like that, and we have a party or we do something fun. But instead of doing that, I thought, as you know, alcohol, we don't want to encourage alcohol drinking amongst children. So I hope you'd all help join me in a toast to my new book. And I've actually got a can of whipped cream, and I will now sample the whipped cream. And thank you all very much for watching. I hope you all enjoy reading Robin Hood. Subscribe to the channel, read the book, post a review on Amazon. Feel free to get in touch with me online anytime via my website or email and stuff like that. And here we go.